So, how many people have heard of Logic Apps? How many of you actively use them? Ooh, not many. Topic today, serverless and codeless. That's a bold statement. We'll come on to that in a minute. As Matt said, I work for confused.com. You've probably heard of us, I would imagine, yes. If you haven't, we're probably not spending enough on TV. The easy way to remember us is we're not the meerkat, we're not the opera singer, and we're not He-Man. We're the other one. Confused have been on a cloud journey for the last kind of 6 or 7 years. We were the first price comparison site some 15, 16 years ago. And we were predominantly a Microsoft shop. And Azure was a natural fit for us. And we're in a weird state now where we've been there, 6, 7 years now, that we're now starting to talk about legacy cloud, which is an insane proposition from my point of view. What we're going to look at today is this idea of integration, and predominantly around using technologies like Logic Apps to do codeless integration points. Now, this is my obligatory meme slide. I have to have one in every presentation. There's a flaw in this, is that if you don't write any code, typically there's no business value. So in the same way as we've talked about how serverless isn't really serverless, my talk on codeless isn't really codeless. Somewhere behind the scenes, we're abstracting away the writing of that code. Now, simple question. How many people here would consider themselves to be in the integration business? Few hands? Few hands? Confused.com certainly is. So every year we deliver something like 2 billion prices to our customers. But that's the big end of the integration scale. So we're talking with 100+ car insurance partners for every request for every customer. And that's the kind of the massive end of the scale. But also at the smaller end of the scale are all the kind of everyday jobs that you do. It's I've got a webhook that I need to respond to or I need to forward onto a database. It's here's an email. When this email arrives, then do something. And it's the stuff that actually serverless is really good at, if you want to write the code. Now, the problem with integration technologies is that they're not very sexy. They're not like the Node world or the JavaScript world, where there's a new framework coming out every week that you have to learn. In the Microsoft space, biztalk was probably the last big kind of innovation. And as we've spent a lot of time using it, and anyone else who's used it will know that there is a certain amount of pain that comes with that. It's a big, monolithic, proper old-school application. Now, when we talk about the small end of the scale, the minute you start working in the cloud, everything has a webhook. Everything is firing some event. In Azure world, there's Event Grid, there's Event Hub, there's Notification Hubs, there's Service Bus, there are storage queues like in S3 and in AWS. And we want to be able to do things off the back of those events. And the reality is that over time, we've all got into the integration business. So we're all, at that micro level, dealing with these tiny little pieces of integration. Anytime you've written code to absorb an API or to call an API, you're in the integration business. Now, I said about biztalk, Microsoft are kind of pushing their weight at the moment behind this idea of Azure Integration Services, which is a marketing term for a collection of stuff that they have in Azure. Those will include things like API management. They will include Service Bus. They'll include Event Grid, Event Hub, whichever one name it is this week. And at the heart of that are Azure Functions and Azure Logic Apps. And depending on the level of code you want to write, will be the way you go. Now, most of this presentation is going to be demo. And nothing strikes fear into the heart of a presenter than 6 other people doing presentations today going, there's dodgy Wi-Fi. So I'm setting the levels now. So Logic Apps are kind of the glue that joins all these Azure services together. These are taken from a Microsoft marketing presentation, so they're a bit waffly. At the heart of Logic Apps is this designer. Now, there's been talk about infrastructure as code today, and everything you're going to see we do today in the demos is deployable via an ARM template. It's deployable as a JSON template, effectively. And just like any function, there are triggers that get fired. The same way with serverless, same way with your lambdas or your functions or whatever. And those triggers are, you know, a file is modified, an email arrives in Office 365, a HTTP request comes in, service bus queue, and we'll show some of those in a minute. Now, these kind of services live or die by the kind of telemetry that you get out of them. And we'll show some of that in the demo as well. This is a proper serverless tool. You're paying per action. And you're getting, I think, by default, something like 90 days worth of stored data out of the back of this for every invocation of your Logic app. These things are only as good as the number of connectors. And there are currently 200 plus, it says there. Pretty much everything in Azure is covered. There's a whole set of AWS connectors in there. If it's not supported and your service is available via a REST API, then you can either create your own connector or just call it as a REST API. It's important to note that Logic apps can also be connected to a VNet, to a virtual network. It's still very preview-ish at the moment. And part of the problem with the way that they handle some of the integration services that allow you to connect to a VNet is that you lose some of the kind of the consumption plannedness of it. You have to provision a certain amount of resources behind the hood. So, enough talk. Let's try, please, to do some demos. Now, the demo we're going to do now is based on this idea of, in fact, it's based on a real-world example. The code that I'm going to write in the end, or the non-code I'm going to write in the end, is not the real-world example. We're working with a third party at the moment to do some chatbot stuff, as is everyone. If I'd have said blockchain, we could have said, got the whole bingo card in today. And as part of that, there is an integration point with our internal systems via a webhook. So we need to be able to set up some URL that someone can call into us on with a specific payload. We can do some stuff and then return back a specific response. It's how the data integrations work in the system. So we're going to start by creating a wrong one. A Logic app. Hang on, that ain't going to work. Until it's been a while since I've done this. So this is the default experience you get in the Azure portal when you create a brand new Logic app. I've skipped the step of actually creating it because it takes a few seconds and I didn't know how much time I was going to have. So by default, you can see we get a set of options to set up predefined templates. And there's actually a whole set of recipes under here as to things you can do. And as you might imagine, they're all geared around Azure services. But there's some interesting things like Slack and Trello, and there's even some Redshift stuff in there as well. But we're going to go and create a brand new Logic app. Now, the URL will be generated as soon as I'm done. And it's worth pointing out that if you're using something like Visual Studio, this designer is available as a development experience for you as well. So you get exactly the same experience that you do in the portal. Now, we're going to start with my request. And this is going to be the request we're going to make. Everyone see that all right? Just about. The URL I'm going to replace in a minute as soon as it gives it to me. Liking the love for VS Code today. I will add my particular addition to it. If you've ever used Postman, there's a plugin for VS Code, certainly on the Windows, I don't know if it's available on the other platforms, called REST Client, which lets you store HTTP requests or curl requests and run them from within VS Code. Really handy tool. So here's our sample request. We're going to copy that into this payload generator, and it will generate me a schema. Okay, so you can see it's just generating me a JSON schema off the back of that. Now, at its simplest, we're just going to respond to that. So I'm going to go, there's my request, response, and we're going to use its templating. I'll make that bigger now, actually, so you can see it. We're going to use its templating tool to build a response which will contain a JSON payload. So I'm going to say message, colon, hello, and then it's given me all these parameters that it's extracted out of the request. So I'm going to go hello and then insert my name in. We save that. I'll zoom back out again. It's now generated me this URL, which I copy into here. And then if the demo gods are smiling on me, I can hit send request. And we get our response back. Okay? So we've just generated HTTP, a publicly available HTTP API, without writing any code. It's all right. We can go better than that. So let's go to our next level of request. And this time we're going to add in a location. So I'm going to amend my schema. And we're going to add in now a request to one of the built-in services. And this is going to be the MSN weather service. And we're going to get the current weather. Now, because I've done that JSON schema work up front, it's now saying we want metric because we are. It's given me that location variable. So it's given me that parameter that's coming from my schema. And I don't have to type any of this. Out of interest, if you want to, there is a code view. And if it wants to load, and it looks like that. Don't use that. Come on. So we're back now. So we've gone get the current weather. And in my message now, I'm going to say weather. And we're going to return back. What have we got there? The weather. I think it's the conditions is what I want. Yeah, weather conditions. So we'll save that. It's preserved my URL from the first request, so I just need to grab that again. We send. And it's telling me apparently it's sunny out there now. There we go. Who knew? I don't say bloody freezing, but it says sunny. So now we're augmenting our HTTP request with another API. That's all right. We can do better than that. So we go on to our third request. And our third request is going to take an image URL. And just to show you that there are parity between every single one of the cloud providers, this is the Azure Vision API. And we're not going to use it to its full extent. We're just literally going to get what's the description it thinks this image is. This, if I remember rightly, is an image of a couple of dogs or a dog in a field. I can't remember which one I picked in the end. Let's just see. Yes, there we go. Dogs in a field. Right. So now we've got an API request in there, and that's cool. We're going to call both these APIs at the same time. We don't want to do that serially. We want to do that in parallel. Now, for us now, that is so okay, let's add our parameter in first. So we've got that available to us. So I want that as my sample request. Generate that one. Done. So it adds the image URL in now. We're going to go onto here and we're going to go add parallel branch. And we're going to call Vision, I think it's called. Vision, Vision. Cognitive Services Computer Vision API. And we're going to ask it to describe my image. And we're going to pass in an image URL, and we're going to add the parameter, which is the image URL I want. And that image URL is going to come from here. Now, challenge with that is, when this comes back, it's actually going to return an array of predictions, an array of things that it thinks. I think it's useful. But I don't want to return that whole JSON object. I just want to take specific parts of that data out. So we're going to use another action, which is a control action called a for each loop. Behaves exactly what you would expect them to do in code. And we're going to look through the output, which is our captions. Oh, not both of them, just one. Now we're going to need an array of strings to be able to put that into, so we're going to create a variable. So I'm going to add an action, a variable, and I'm going to initialize a variable called captions. It's going to be an array, and it's going to be empty when it starts. And for some reason, it switched sides on me. That's really confusing. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to append to an array variable. So our array variable is the one I've just created. My captions, my thing that I want to save is going to be my text. And then I need to do one more thing here, which is actually to create a new response object. Taking out all those. And this is the equivalent of your kind of wait all in C# land, or we're going to paste that into there, and then I'm going to get rid of that one. Okay, so the nice part about this is it's readable. We've had discussions amongst the developers where we've sat and looked at a way that a workflow is going and going, oh no, you can optimize that, make those two bits parallel. Drag, drag, done. And that's really powerful for these small, tiny little integrations. So if I save that now, and then paste my URL in, and then we will get back, eventually, hopefully. What have I done? Have I not saved it? Because I didn't return the final thing. There we go. Captions, and then we'll just drop that variable in. We'll run that again. And it's saying, a dog standing on top of a grass-covered field. There we go. So if you look at what we've done there, we've integrated two third-party APIs, sort of third-party APIs. We've done parallel calls. We've done a for each call. We've done variable calls. And we've done formatting of a response block to generate a kind of custom JSON response. And we've done that in the scope of, what, 10 minutes? We're hard-pressed to do that in code. So just to show you kind of where things end up, I've got some other variations. So this is a variation of one I was doing earlier, where we started writing to table storage as well. So you can end up seeing there we go. So we've now got inserting entities into a table. And we're using that same templating system to build these data logging exercises. Now, the important part about this is the telemetry you get back, which I spoke briefly about earlier. And for every run that's happened through my Logic app, I can drill further into them, and I can go and see the inputs and outputs to every one of those elements. Okay, so my describe image API. Come on. Now this is where the Wi-Fi bites me. So you see, we can see inputs and outputs, so we can see the raw data. So you can do this kind of iterative development of an integration. And that just about wraps it up for me. So if we bring that back up, do that. Oh, not again. Oh, there we go. So if you want to follow me, Memleak on Twitter, I'll occasionally blog about some of this sort of stuff at that address there. The documentation, all credits to Microsoft, the documentation they've got currently for Logic Apps is very good. And if you've got any questions, then please feel free to find me afterwards, and I'm happy to talk through more examples. Thank you very much.